It's good to see you guys tonight. And it's true, I do like you for the most part. For the most part. No, I like you guys a lot. And even as I stood here, the other thing that Josh always says I do is cry. And it's kind of true sometimes. But I was like, no, I don't even feel like crying tonight. I don't think I'm going to cry. And then I was standing as you guys were walking through those doors, and I was like, oh, dang, I might cry. So, sorry if it happens. Sometimes it happens. I hope you guys had a good week. We had our first snow this week. Okay, so some people are excited about that. When it starts snowing, I was like, oh, okay, snow. All right, yeah, snow. Snow usually means the end of fall, and I really like fall. And there's a lot of things I like about fall. I like those little candy pumpkins. They're like candy corns, but they're pumpkins. My fave. Really like those. But one of the things I most like about fall is the spring. I need to explain that. I have an addiction. I have an addiction to bulbs. I love to buy bulbs that grow into tulips or daffodils or irises. And every time in every fall is the time to plant bulbs. I know you're like, who is this guy? What's he into? Fall is the time to plant bulbs. And so in the entrance to Winco, they always have a bulb section set up there. You never notice it. You walk right by it, but I'm like, oh, look, there's bulbs. And I'm like, I wonder if I should buy some. I don't know if I should. No, I'm not going to buy them. I'll just get through those doors and I go on through. In Walmart, the garden center, huge bulb section in the fall. In Costco, oh my goodness, Costco has this huge bulk section of bulbs in the fall. And so every time we go shopping in the fall, I'm trying to fight myself not to buy more bulbs. And sometimes I give in. And so we were down in Costco a couple weeks ago, and my wife and I, with the fam, and I get to the bulb section. It's getting late in the season, and the bulbs are on sale. I'm like, oh, April, can we get some more bulbs? And she says, touches my hand and says, Matthew, put away the bulbs. You have enough bulbs. We still got a bag. I didn't have this kind. We had to get this kind. So a couple weekends ago, I planted 150 new bulbs in my front yard. Man. They're glorious, and I love them. Here's what I love about bulbs so much, okay? So you take a bulb. Here, I brought one for you. I actually dug this one up because I didn't have any left. And this is a daffodil bulb. Just this little brown thing. Got some little roots, started to grow. Been in about 2 weeks before I disrupted it. It's a daffodil bulb. What you do is you plant these things in the fall, end of October, 1st of November, and you dig a hole about 6 inches deep, and you put this down in there, and you cover it up with dirt. You put a layer of bark dust on top of it, sprinkle some fertilizer on top, and water it real well. And then you leave it. It's just there, waiting underneath the ground, waiting and waiting. And then the days begin to get shorter, and it starts to get darker. And then snow starts to fall, and starts to get colder. Winter starts to set in. It's dark, cold. Bitter cold. And it just goes on and on through December and into January, and it's still cold and dark. February comes along, and it's still cold and dark, and ice on everything, and it's sad and depressing. And about March, it's still cold and dark, but you look out in the front yard, and you see poking up behind the bark dust these little leaves, these little green leaves, just starting to poke out. Starting to break through the layer of snow, and you think, oh, okay, something's happening out there. So you go on, and it keeps snowing, and it's still bitter cold, and you're like, I'm tired of these clothes, I'm ready for spring, and then finally, about the 1st of April, you look out there in the front yard one day, and this has turned to a daffodil. It's turned to this. There she is. Oh, and you're like, oh, yes, thank the Lord, winter is coming to an end. There is hope that the cold, dark days will be done one day, soon. This bright lights in the front yard, these bright lights in the front yard, it gives us hope that winter will come to an end, that there is summer on its way, that one day I can wear shorts again. But it took a long time to get there. And this bulb sat there under the earth for 4 months, 5 months almost, before it came to completion, before it did what it was meant to do. The reason I love it so much is because, quite frankly, I grew up in Texas, and its winter's done in February. And when I first moved to Idaho, it was fun at first. But man, that winter is long. And it wears on me. So I started planting bulbs to remind myself, like, hey, spring is coming. Winter doesn't last forever. There's an end to this. There's deeper meaning in this that stirs emotions in me and in some ways leads me to worship. The Christian life on planet Earth, just life in general, is difficult, is hard. And even as I watch you guys walk in, as I stand here and I look at your faces, and some of you I know you, and some of you I know you well, and I know the stuff going on in your life, and I know the challenges that you're facing. I know the questions that you have and the things you're wrestling with. And life is not easy. And here at Resonate Church, we hope that we don't have any kind of put forth any kind of preconceived notion or pretense that we believe that life is easy, or even that Christianity makes your life easy. It's not true. Life on planet Earth is just hard. Some days are harder than others. Some weeks, months, some years are harder than others. And some of you, even at your young age, in your early 20s, even in your late teens, already you recognize this ain't easy. That life is difficult. And the Christian life is tough. Sometimes we get the impression that, well, if I just become a Christian and get Jesus on my side, get God on my side, then it solves all my problems. I'll have no more worries. I'll have no more problems. Life just gets easy. And if you've done it very long, if you've tried to live the Christian life very long, you recognize that's not true. We're studying and looking through this book of Philippians as Paul is writing this letter, and he's writing it from prison to a group of people who are facing persecution, who are being beat up, sometimes figuratively, sometimes literally, because of their faith. They're being spoken against, and they're facing turmoil and trials. Life in the first century just wasn't easy. In this very chapter, he talks about a guy who almost died because of illness. That still happens today, obviously. Life was tough. And so just because they were Christians, just because Paul was a Christian, and a really good one, didn't mean life was easy. In fact, it made his life harder. To live the Christian life is sometimes very difficult. But here's what's true. We have a God who knows all and sees all and is what we call omnipresent and omniscient. He's big. I'm going to throw some theology out at you guys just to get us started here tonight. I think you guys can handle it. You guys like theology? Some theological terms. All right, so he's all-knowing. And I want you to know this about our church. We believe that God is all-knowing and he knows what's happening. To the fact, this gets a little sci-fi for you, but he exists outside of time and space. So he looks at human history and he sees it all in one quick glance. And in that, he's not worried about it. He's got it all under control. This passage that Josh read just a moment ago, at the beginning it says, "Therefore, my dear friends, as you've always obeyed, not only in my presence, but now much more in my absence, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. For it is God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill his good promise." So it is God who works to work out his goodwill to his will and his promise. So there's a God who is at work and he is doing something. He is making decisions based on what he thinks is best, what he knows is best. And here we are on planet Earth where things are going poorly because of our own, Bible calls it our own rebellion. This thing that's called sin has brought about brokenness in our world, and it's messed some stuff up. And the pain and the challenges and the trials that we face, no matter who you are, Christian or non-Christian, is due to that sin, that brokenness. But God says, I've got a plan, I've got it figured out, and I'm going to do something about it. And so he brought about an opportunity for us to be reconnected with him. It's this term we call salvation, where we're reconnected in our relationship with God. And once we experience salvation and we're reconnected in our relationship with God, the rebellion that we had against him is done away with, and he says, no, come close. There's this other word called justification, where he says, hey, I'm going to make you all right with me. Previously, when you were on your own, you were not all right with me, but I got to do away with that, and I got to make you all right with me, so that I can look at you and not only call you all right, but I'll call you son, I'll call you daughter, I'll call you family. I want to invite you into my family. So he does what needs to be done to bring us into his family. And when he does this, it begins this process of, well, two things happen in that. He sees us as complete or as done because he sees the whole picture and he says, my perfect family. I've made you perfect. And so he sees us in our perfect state. So at the same time, we find ourselves on a daily basis where we look like this. We're like, yeah, I know that you see me as perfect. You see me as complete. But right now I feel like this. He sees the yellow daffodil. He sees the big picture. And on a daily basis, we feel like this. We feel like we're trapped underground as this little brown thing. And so we're in this process in the meantime called sanctification. So there's justification when God says, boom, it's done. I've done this for you. And then there's this process of sanctification where it says, I'm doing this for you. So this is one of the greatest paradoxes that we see throughout Scripture, where it is done and yet is being done. God has saved us and he is saving us. God has transformed us. When he looks at us, he sees us as complete. And he is transforming us. While we are trapped in this time and space on planet Earth, while our hearts are still beating and we're in this lifetime, there's a process of going on for those of us who are walking and following in Christ, who've accepted this justification, who've accepted this salvation, who've said, yes, Lord, I no longer want to be separated from you, but bring me close, bring me into your family. And so God looks at us, he says, all right, you're mine. I see you as complete. But also, while you're on planet Earth in this process, you're working towards completion. And let me not lose you on that. Not that you're working to earn your salvation, but he invites you into the process of becoming what he knows you will be, of becoming what he knows he has planned for you. All right? And we got really heady there real quick. He's invited us to be a part of this, to be a part of this sanctification. So there in verse 12, he says, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. Work it out. Work it out. Learn what God is and learn what he has in mind for you. Our God, who is all-knowing, Resonate, I want you to know this, loves you deeply, loves you more than you know. He knows you better than anyone else, and he loves you more than anyone else. And despite the fact that he knows you better than anyone else, he still loves you. And he wants a relationship with you, and he wants what's best for you. He wants to pursue his good purpose in your life. So what is his good purpose? He desires for you to have a relationship with him, but also in the meantime, for us, as we're in this process, we need each other. In this whole book of Philippians, we're looking at it from that lens of saying, how is God communicating to us that we need each other? We've talked about that for the last 2 weeks. We'll continue to process through that in these coming weeks. And tonight, for us to live life together, to do life together, we need to know that God has a big plan for us. He has a big plan for you. And he knows that even though you feel like this, he knows where you're headed. And he is doing things on purpose, even though it feels like a long winter with lots of snow and really dark and a lot of darkness. He says, I've got a plan for that. I know what I'm doing with that. I know why that's happening now, because I'm going to do something in you. I'm going to transform you into something that you wouldn't even believe if I told you. Can you believe that from this comes that? That sounds ridiculous. If I held you this, if I gave you this and told you this is going to be a beautiful flower, would you even believe me? Maybe. Maybe you've seen one of these before, but no, probably not. It's phenomenal. And to think about what your life is now and what he has planned for eternity and how he's moving you towards that. And even now, despite what you think is happening, from his perspective, he knows. And he likes it. And he's doing it on purpose, his good purpose. And we're in this together as a family. So why? Why is he doing this? Why does he trap us in this time and space and have us in this process? It's a good question. It's a question many people come to and ask, why all the suffering in the world? Why is life hard? Why is it difficult? Well, it's like this. God has a plan. Right now it seems like darkness. And as you sit in the darkness and you're like, what is going on in here? And it's a little bewildering at first, and your eyes are beginning to adjust and you're beginning to see little lights come out. But if you look into the darkness, like there's not much difference between the darkness on the left side of the screen, left side of the room, and the right side of the room. can see a screen back there in the back. You can see some exit lights in the back of the room, but it's darkness. And just as your mind is drawn to the light, we always go to the light. Even as I turn this on, automatically your eyes, they go right here. You're drawn to the light. Throughout Scripture, we see this metaphor, this picture that God uses to communicate who he is, that he is light in the darkness. There's nothing like him. He stands out among everything else. And the reality is he wants this for us. This is his purpose, his good purpose, that we would shine like stars in the night. We would shine like light in the midst of darkness. All right, fellas, we can turn the lights back on. He has a glorious plan for us that is so much greater than we could imagine. He's drawing us into this together. That he wants us in the midst of the darkness that is covering this earth, in the midst of the hardness, in the midst of the death, in the midst of the reality that life on earth is not easy, that is not fun every day, that it is hard. He wants us to shine. He wants us to, just like that light in the midst of a dark room, he wants us to stand out. That we as a people, as a family together, are called to stand out in the darkness and draw others to ourselves. Jesus said this himself in Matthew chapter 5. He said, you are like a city on a hill. Have you ever seen a city on a hill? Even a city in a valley, a city behind a hill. It shines light into the sky. If you've ever driven down from Coeur d'Alene at night and you're beginning to come over those last couple of hills, you begin to see the lights of Moscow as you come up over that last ridge. A city on a hill shines in the night. We are called to be a city on the hill. And in fact, in the book of Isaiah, it says that that God's people are meant to be a light to others, a light to reveal God's salvation to the ends of the earth. That he has a good purpose for us that is even bigger than ourselves. That we are to be a light to the world. That actually God's light shines through us to the world around us. And he's inviting us into that, to be a part of that. And if you are willing to trust that God understands what's going on, that he sees the big picture, so much bigger than you could ever understand from your limited perspective, if you're able to trust him, then you can follow him and be a part of what he is doing, of shining his light into the world around us. So the question is, sweet, I want in on that action. How do I do that? How do I get in on that action? How do I be a part of this light? How do I be a light to the world? Well, you may be surprised by this. There in verse 14, Paul, in writing to the Philippians, he says it right there. Do everything without grumbling and arguing. Verse 15, so that you may become blameless and pure, children of God without fault in a warped and crooked generation. Then you will shine like that light in this dark room. Then you will shine like stars in the sky as you hold firmly to the word of life. So if you want to shine brightly, all you have to do is verse 14, do everything without grumbling or arguing. Really? That's what you came up with? Shouldn't we like give away all our money or be crucified or something like that? Or shouldn't we just, wear really bright clothes or, what else? No, he says that we should stop grumbling and arguing. I don't know if that feels perplexing to you, but it's interesting that he would say that's what we have to do. To be a light in the darkness, we have to stop grumbling and arguing. We started reading this passage. All the site pastors are preaching to different sites today, and when we started reading this passage, we started studying it together, and we started talking about, grumbling and arguing. Oh, this is going to be a good sermon. Because I've met some people in our church that they grumble and argue. And in this, we began to complain about complainers. It didn't take us long. We're like, oh, those complainers, they're the worst. Complainers, I hate them. And we were grumbling and arguing about you guys. And then I realized, wait a minute. I think I complain. I'm complaining about complaining right now. Complaining about people who complain. Then I began to think and process even more that I think I might have a complaining problem. I began to think about instances where I complained, and I'm not real sure why. About a year and a half ago, my family and I, we moved houses here in Moscow and had the opportunity to move into a bigger house as our family had grown. And it was an older home and needed some things fixed up in it. We moved in and we began to paint the walls and do a few minimal touch-ups. And soon after we moved in, and we invited some friends over, some friends who they'd seen our old house, and they came into our new house, and we're giving them the tour, and they're like, oh, I love this part right here. I love what you guys have done here with this paint. It looks good. And we're like, yeah, we kind of like that. It's not perfect. It's not straight up there at the top, but yeah, it's kind of fun. We like the paint colors, and we go into the kitchen. Oh, it's a nice kitchen. It's spacious. I like this one countertop right here. So, yeah, it's okay, but we don't really like the Formica on there. We'd love to replace that. And go into the living room, and oh, well, this is spacious. Oh, and I like those blinds. Those are really nice blinds. Yeah, they're okay. They're kind of dingy. They were here when we moved in. But I realized after they left, the whole time they were there, I complained about my house. And I love my new house. In fact, those blinds were one of the things I liked most about them because they were there. I wasn't expecting to get those blinds when we bought the house, and then they left them there. It was like I got them for free, which is like my favorite thing in the world. And then when they talked about them, I criticized them. Instead of saying, yeah, those are great blinds. They were free, practically, except for, a couple $100,000 we paid for the house, but the huge mortgage and all that stuff. But, and I found myself complaining just because. I felt like that's what I should do now. I should look at the stuff that I have and I should complain about it. Maybe I'm ashamed that we moved into a new house, or maybe I should downplay it or whatever. So I complained about stuff that really I like. I kept thinking about it, and I realized I have other areas of complaining in my life, areas where I have something that is really good, and then I'll complain about it or not be satisfied with it. My wife is a really good cook. When we got married, she continued to learn to cook. She learned to cook before we were married, and as we got married, she kept experimenting and learning new recipes. And there's this one soup that she learned a couple of years ago. It's this chicken taco soup, and it just has an explosion of flavors in your mouth. And I just love to eat it. And you mix in some sour cream and cheese, and it's just so good. And it's even better the day after. You know that about soup, right? Like, for whatever reason, you leave it for 24 hours, and then you eat it the second time, you're like, this is even better. Soup's the best. That's the best part of winter, is soup. So I remember a couple weeks ago, I spend Wednesdays on campus there at UI, and we hang out in the Commons. I had different meetings, and sometimes just to hang out and meet people. And as you all know, one of the greatest things happened to Moscow this past fall. Josh talked about it last week, but we got a Chick-fil-A. And I know, it changed my life in many ways. And when the semester started, I'd be like, Wednesday, Chick-fil-A day. And so when I go to campus, I just go plan on buying some Chick-fil-A. And I would just plan on it. And after a couple weeks into the semester, I began to realize Chick-fil-A is a little more expensive than I remember it. And I began to realize, looking at the budget, I was like, it's probably not best for me to go and buy Chick-fil-A, especially I kind of felt like I was going against my family's back or whatever, or I can get to eat Chick-fil-A and they don't get to come to campus and eat Chick-fil-A. And so I was starting to feel guilty about it. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna start bringing my lunch. I need to fight the temptation and fight the urge to eat Chick-fil-A every time I'm on campus and bring my lunch. And so thankfully my wife's a great cook. And so when we would eat dinner, I would purposely say, okay, I'm not gonna eat everything at this meal, though I could. I will choose to not eat everything, and I'll set some aside for lunch on Wednesdays, lunch tomorrow. And so a couple weeks ago, I had this awesome soup that we made, this chicken taco tortilla soup stuff with the sour cream on top and the cheese. I had it in my little container. I bring it to campus, and I'll open up those doors, and I walk in. It's like, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling strong. Not gonna eat Chick-fil-A today. Not gonna eat Chick-fil-A today. And I walk over there, and sure enough, 10 o'clock, those metal doors come up, and I'm like, oh, gosh. It's like a magnet, just all of a sudden it gets turned on. I'm like, oh, man. So noon rolls around. I'm like, all right, I'm going to go warm up my soup. And so I go warm it up, and I sit down to eat it, and I taste it. And sure enough, it's been 24 hours, and it was on point. Tasted great. And soup was tasting good. Halfway through my bowl of soup, I'm like, man, go great with this is some Chick-fil-A. And I began to find myself complaining like, man, why did I bring this soup? I should have just ate Chick-fil-A. But I love this soup. It's my favorite soup. I have something that is good, and yet I'm not satisfied with it. I began to find myself grumbling even arguing with myself and complaining. Oftentimes we do that. Regularly we do that. We have something that's good. We see something else we think might be better. We're unsatisfied with it. We begin to complain and argue and grumble. Also, as I began to realize that I have a complaining issue, I noticed my kids have a complaining issue too. They like to grumble and argue. Recently, as in like 24 hours ago, I had a beard. And I've been growing it for the last couple months. Many of you don't know me without a beard. Some of you I just met this semester. And but my kids all along, they've been like, Dad, that beard is gross. Feels funny. Don't kiss me. Ugh. Dad, you need to shave that. That looks funny. That's weird. It's all poofy. Complaining. Darn kids. So last night, I was like, I'm going to shave my beard, guys. I'm going to shave it. I'll let them trim a little bit of it for me. And then I shaved it off, and they left, and they came back, and they're like, oh, Dad, what happened? What'd you do? You look funny. That's weird. You look strange. Dad, your nose got bigger. What? How did that happen? A bunch of complainers. My kids complain too. The reality is we have a complaining issue. We have a grumbling issue. There's a Wall Street Journal article that I found this past week that says that a study was done that 95% of people, customers, that bought something and were dissatisfied, 95% of them, they grumbled about it. What that means is they went and they told someone else. They didn't go to the company that actually made the product and that could actually do something about it. Instead, they went and told 10 to 15 other people. 10 to 15 other people that couldn't do anything about it. They just complained about it. You've done that before, right? They grumbled. Here's the difference between grumbling and arguing. Grumbling is when you complain behind someone's back or not to their face. Arguing is when you complain to their face. It's all complaining. There's another statistic I found. Huffington Post article says that 30 to 40% of our conversation as Americans these days is complaining, is negative, is arguing, is grumbling. We have a complaining issue among us. You know this. It's hard to get in a conversation and not complain. I mean, try it. See if you can get an hour into your life and not say a complaining word. You'd be like, what do I talk about? How about the weather? I'm going to complain about that. Like, what are you going to do? We complain regularly. We find things that we're dissatisfied with. We find things that we want or something like that, and we begin to complain about it. It's not a new issue. It's been around for a while. Israel, they had a complaining issue. When we look in the Old Testament, even this language that Paul uses is referencing the Old Testament history of God's own people and how they had a complaining issue. When he says, children of God without fault in a warped and crooked generation, he's referring to, that's reference to the people of Israel, many back in the Old Testament. This word grumbling isn't used very much in the New Testament, but it's the word that's regularly used to refer to God's people in the Old Testament and how they would grumble. Many of you know the Exodus story of how God went and rescued his people, much like that story of how he came to earth and rescued us out of our state of rebellion against him. He came and rescued them out of slavery. And he sent Moses. Maybe some of you have seen the old Ten Commandments movie, where Ben-Hur with Charlton Heston, and he parts the Red Sea and Ten Commandments and all that stuff. That tells the story of him bringing them out of Egypt, miraculous things. The most powerful man on earth, Pharaoh, and God, the God, I am God, says, no, you're not a God, Pharaoh. I'm God. Let me show you. And pretty much just treats him like a rag doll for a couple weeks. And then he allows his people to go, and Moses leads him out of Egypt and across the Red Sea. The sea literally parts in half, and they walk across on dry land. This miraculous escape brings them out of Egypt. And it's not long before they're out in the desert, and God's people, who'd been a part of so much and seen something so amazing, that they start grumbling and complaining. And they get out there and they're like, Moses, what'd you bring us out here for? Right here in the middle of the desert. There's not any water, Moses. Where's the beef, Moses? I'm hungry. I want something to eat, Moses. I have blisters on my feet, Moses. There's snakes out here, Moses. They're just complaining and complaining. Why are you our leader, Moses? Why can't somebody else do it, Moses? Are we there yet, Moses? And they just keep complaining and complaining. Moses gets worn down by it. They complain against God. God, what are you doing? As if they don't trust him, as if they haven't seen something incredible happen. And they continue to grumble and complain. These people continue to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. For 40 years until that entire generation of people who grumbled and complained die off. And there's a complete turnover of the people before God allows them to go where he had planned for them. They could have covered this distance that they had to cover in about 2 weeks. And it took them 40 years as they wandered in the wilderness, as God daily provided for them this food literally from heaven. Every day they would wake up and the earth was covered with food they could eat. And they grumbled about it. That's amazing. And they grumbled about it. And it was serious to God, serious enough that he said, if you are my people, you can't continue to act this way. And if you're going to continue to grumble, I will wait. I will wait till you're gone. It is intense enough that there is an angel in the Bible that is referred to as the destroyer angel who takes care of grumbling people. What? Yeah. Grumbling is a serious deal. And so Paul writes to his friends in Philippi, and he says, if we are going to be a light, if we are going to do and fulfill and work out what God is doing in us and be a part of his good purpose, we can't be grumbling. We can't complain. We can't argue. It can't be among us. We have to rid ourselves of it. We have to do something about it. And so you might say to yourself, who cares? Matthew, why is this such a big deal? Everybody grumbles. Everybody complains. That's the point. Because everybody does it. Just imagine if we didn't. If you didn't. You would shine in the darkness like stars in the sky. You would bring attention to a God who knows all and sees all and leads us towards his good purpose. The world would interact with you and they would say there's something different. There's something about their language. There's something about the way he talks, the way she communicates. It's like it's missing something. It's like it's missing 30 to 40% of the stuff that I talk about. It's like she doesn't grumble. It would shine in the darkness and reveal who God is. Here's the issue. Ultimately, when we complain, what we are saying is that we are saying to God, God, I know better. I know better. When we grumble and complain, we're saying, God, I've got this figured out. I know I'm only 20 years old. I know that I'm only 25 years old. I know that I'm only 36 years old, but God, I think I've got it from here. Thanks for your help so far. Thanks for the oxygen. Thanks for all the food that I've gotten thus far, but I think I've got it figured out. When we complain, it boils down to, God, I think I know better. That my perspective, from what I can see, from my time on earth, from where I sit, I think that I'm smarter than you, God. I think that I have got it all figured out. And so if you think you have it figured out, you'll find yourself regularly complaining about the way things are. And ultimately, if you keep complaining, you ultimately get to God where you say, God, why are things the way they are? And then when that hard day comes, that hard week, that hard month, that hard year, you find yourself, I don't know why things are the way they are, but I'll complain to God because it's his fault. And you believe that you know better than God. Here's the second part. Ultimately, when we complain, we are saying to God that I deserve better. I deserve better. I've earned more than this. God, I went to church. I've been to church several times. I've been to church pretty good attendance. I've even gone to that midweek thing, that village thing they've been talking about. I even cooked a meal for that. God, look at all I've done. I deserve better. I've done this stuff, so you're supposed to help me out and make my life easier. And we get to the place where we say, I deserve better. I've earned this. God, you owe me. That's where we come to a place, ultimately, when we complain and grumble, we're saying, God, you owe me. And essentially, we're just saying, I am better. God, I am better. And ultimately, this ends up in a comparison game where I'm comparing myself to you. I'm saying I'm better than you, so I can complain about how you're not as good as I am. I can complain about that thing you do that drives me nuts because I'm better than you. And we begin to get this skewed perspective that's everything's revolving around me. That I'm the center of the universe. And if I'm the center, then I have freedom to complain about whatever I want. And here's the reality. You and I are not the center of the universe. We look like this. But thankfully, you have a God, we have a God that loves us deeply and is in pursuit of us. And he has something better for us, something so much greater than we could ever ask or imagine. And he is working in us towards that good purpose. And he invites us to be a part of that process of sanctification, to work out our salvation, to be a part of what he is doing in our life. So we go from and put aside this perspective of the world is revolving around me, and we say, okay, I'm setting that aside. And instead, God, what is your perspective? God, what do you see? The hard week that I'm having, the challenges that I'm facing, the sickness that's in my life or my family, or the issues that are in these relationships that I have, or this living situation, or my finances, it's all so overwhelming and it seems so dark. God, help me to shine in the darkness. Now, this issue of complaining, I could give you some steps. I give you 7 steps to dealing with complaining. And there's a guy on the internet, he'll sell you a purple bracelet that you put on your wrist. And you tell yourself, I'm not going to complain, I'm not going to complain, I'm not going to complain. But then when you complain, you're supposed to take the purple thing off this wrist and put on this wrist. And then you start all over. See how long you can go without complaining. And that might work. It might help out a little bit. Or you can just be like Thumper and Bambi and say, okay, if I can't say anything good about someone else, I just won't say anything at all. So then you're just really quiet all the time. But inside, you're still churning with grumblings and arguments and complaints. Ultimately, it all boils down back to trusting that God is up to something. To trusting that even though life is hard, even though there's a lot of questions, even though it's confusing some days, to say, God, you are God and I am not. God, I trust you. To be able to come to the place where we can, and this may sound cheesy, where we can conquer complaining. Conquer complaining, and it's not a head-on tactic, but to get to the heart of the issue. To get to what's going on inside. And to do these 3 things. Simply trust God. When life is hard, take a step back and say, God, help me to trust you. God, I trust you. God, I trust that you see things better than I see them. I trust that you can do things better than I can do them. I trust that you are God and I am not God. Number 2, remember what he has done. Remember what he has done. That was the problem with Israel, that they wouldn't remember what he has done, what they had seen him do. In your life already, you have seen God at work at some place. To think back on where you've seen him at work, where you have seen him at work in your own life, where you've seen God move, and remember those things. Journal about those things. Sit down and write that out. God, I remember this. I remember what you have done in my life, and I will not forget it, because I'm moving forward. If I can remember what you've done in the past, trust that you're working now. I can trust you in the future. And number 3, grow in gratitude. The opposite of grumbling is gratitude. If you can grow in gratitude, which is just simply this, being thankful for what you have. Being thankful for what you have and what you haven't earned. And that boils down to what God has done on your behalf. When you were in rebellion against him and lost in the darkness, he came into the darkness and snatched you out of the kingdom of darkness and brought you into the kingdom of light. Brought you into his family. You didn't deserve it. You didn't earn it. And he said, but you're mine and I want you to be a part of my family. And the gratitude that he has done that for you. And start with that base layer and then begin to say, God, I'm grateful. I have gratitude for what you've done in my life. I'm thankful that I have air to breathe. I'm thankful that my heart is still beating. I'm thankful that I have clothes on my back. I'm thankful that I have a community of people that shine light that I can be in this with. And he invites you into that. To no longer be trapped in the darkness, looking like everyone else, grumbling and complaining. But you have an invitation to do life together, do family together in the light, trusting him to be your God and safely being his people, his family. The band's going to come up and I want to pray for us. We're going to continue to worship on this. You need to ask yourself, you do well to think about, am I complaining? Do I have a complaining issue? It won't take you long to come to the place, I'm quite confident in this, to realize, yes, you do. And then to go to God, God, where am I not trusting you ultimately? Where am I trying to be God? Where am I saying that I'm better than you, that I see things better, that I know things better, that I'm better than everyone else? And how is that affecting your language, affecting your heart? And then, honestly, you just need to tell God, I'm sorry for my rebellion against you. I'm sorry for my grumbling and complaining. God, help me to walk in the light and to be a light in this darkness. Father, we thank you for this opportunity to hear from you tonight. Father, we pray that you would do work in our church, that you would continue to lead us in your will and in your good purpose. Father, I pray that over our church, that we would know your truth, that we would trust you to be God. And as we trust you, God, that we'd recognize our own grumbling, our own selfishness, our own places in our life where we see ourselves as better than you, as knowing things better. God, just as in that humility we talked about last week, God, help us to trust you with our lives, to trust you to be God. And even as we move into this, conveniently enough, a Thanksgiving season, God, help us to grow in gratitude. Father, I pray that, and I ask that in the name of Jesus Christ. And I pray with hope. I pray with gratitude. Amen.